One of the most important forces shaping our lives is something we rarely think about, but it influences what we learn, what we remember, what we notice, and ultimately who we become. And perhaps most importantly, it determines which part of reality we experience and which parts we miss entirely. This isn't about the matrix, this is about attention. Most of us think about attention as simply the ability to focus. But as you're about to hear, attention is far, far more than that. My name is Mark Guadagnoli, and I'm the Senior Associate Dean for Faculty Affairs at the Kurt Kerkorian School of Medicine here at UNLV and a Professor of Neuroscience. Thank you for joining us for today's special Academy podcast episode. Our guest is Dr. Marvin Chun, one of the world's leading cognitive neuroscientists. He's the Richard M. Colgate Professor of Psychology at Yale University and a former dean of Yale College. In this conversation, we explore attention, memory, context, the brain report card, and what neuroscience can teach us about seeing ourselves and the world around us. Marvin's journey is almost as fascinating as his science. He was born in San Francisco, and at the age of 12, he moved to Korea without speaking a word of Korean. Understandably, he struggled academically for years, but ultimately he caught fire, went on to study at MIT, earned his PhD at Harvard, became a professor at Yale, and emerged as one of the most influential voices in cognitive neuroscience. So obviously he ended up okay. But what makes this conversation special isn't simply Marvin's accomplishments. It's the way he connects serious science to everyday life, helping us to understand why what we pay attention to may be one of the most important decisions we make in life. He does all this in a beautifully hopeful and caring way. The world has some fascinating and wonderful people in it, and Dr. Marvin Chun is certainly one of those people. I'm proud to call Marvin a friend, and I hope you find the conversation as enlightening and positive as I did. If you do, please share the podcast with the people you care about. Let's boogie. Dr. Marvin Chun, it is my great pleasure to have you, an outstanding scholar and human being and a friend. And I'm really excited about the conversation. We're going to talk about attention, about the context and how important it is in learning environment. We're going to talk about the brain report card that you just presented recently at a conference we were at together. But I really want to start to talk about who you are as a person and what the origin story is, and then we'll move into some of the science as well.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mark. I'm really happy and honored to be here. You're a great friend and a colleague and professional that I hugely admire. So I was very excited when you invited me to join you on the show. My origin story is fairly unique for a Korean American because my parents had arrived in the United States in the mid-1960s at a time when there weren't many Koreans moving to the States. And so I'm fairly unique of that generation to have been born in the United States. I was born in San Francisco, California, where I grew up for about 10 years, lived in Tennessee for 2 years, and then we moved back to Korea when I was age 12. That part is also unique in that most people who immigrated to the United States, they usually didn't go back to Korea. But my parents were fairly unique in going back, mainly for an appealing job that my dad got in Korea. So we moved back at age 12. And the catch is that I didn't speak a word of Korean. I didn't understand
Wait, you
Korean.
didn't speak Korean when you
Not at
moved
all.
moved back?
Not at all. Like there was no plans for our family to go back to Korea growing up. And so my parents didn't push hard on trying to teach me Korean. Or to be more fair to them, I was pretty resistant of their attempts to try to have me learn Korean. When they sent me to Korean school and all that kind of stuff, bought me books and everything. But for some reason, when I was a child, I was just super not interested in learning my heritage language or being able to understand what my parents said. So that's fairly unique in that I was born and raised here, and the fact that we moved back makes me into an even smaller category.
It's, you know, two things that you just made me think about. One, when you said that your family moved to Korea, um, my first question was going to be, did you speak Korean? And I thought, oh, what a dumb question. You of course you did, but you didn't, which is remarkable at age 12, different culture. I think this is going to be an interesting thread for us because as we'll talk about later, you have studied context. And so this may be something that we talk about as impacting your context. The other thing that you made me kind of laugh about, my parents bought me books. My dad used to say all the time, I bought you books and I bought you books and you still can't read. And I think that was supposed to motivate me. I don't know that it did, at least for a couple of decades. But okay, so then you move back to the States, and you've got a really remarkable academic pedigree. I mean, and I want you to talk about this. MIT, Harvard, Yale, that's a pretty high-flying academic pedigree.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. When I went back to Korea, it was, it was like having the rug pulled up, under you. Like I wasn't able to, I was fairly good in school when I was growing up, but moving back to Korea, I started to, like be at the bottom of the class for several years. So that was very disruptive. And then that continued all the way up to my first year of college. And then finally around then, things started to really click. And then my grades went up, and I started to gain more confidence in my abilities. And then I was just super fortunate at that stage to have met some amazing mentors. I think we can all thank our teachers and mentors for all the big breaks in life, certainly in academia. I had some incredible mentors, especially Professor Chan Sup-jung and also Professor Yoon Jin. They really liked me and like took me under their wing in college. And I was essentially, groomed by them. And they gave me guidance on what I should be doing next. And I followed their guidance, and things have worked out pretty well for me since then. Just find a good teacher and follow what they say.
Marvin, I was thinking about a mentor that I had, Charlie Shea, when I was at Texas A&M, and
Yeah.
it made me wonder, what was it about those people? What did they give you that really moved you forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I think this is relevant for all kinds of teachers and all kinds of mentors and coaches and anyone who's in a role of, um, you know, helping others. I think the number one thing is they care for you, right? They care about your success. They care about your future. They believe in you, and I think especially the latter is what helps you start to believe in yourself, because you need confidence to take risk and to do anything. I think in any career, and to have some accomplished person that you admire tell you that you have a future or that you have some potential, I think is probably the most empowering thing one person can give to another.
I agree with you. I think that from my perspective, teaching is a privilege, like either formal teaching or informal teaching. It's a privilege, and it is a huge responsibility. And I think that those impactful moments in our lives, like I think this is one of the things where I hope those teachers, the people that you're talking about, in my case, Charlie and some others, they understand the impact that they had. And likewise, you, we can go on Rate My Professor and see the kinds of things that your students are saying about you. You've been that for so many students along the way too. You teach psychology classes in the psychology department, and the ratings and the comments are remarkable. And you've been awarded for that as well, which I think is well received. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you. As you say, teaching is a privilege. I feel very privileged and lucky and grateful that I'm able to be in my role here as a professor in at Yale. And through this role, I get to meet some very amazing young students and talent, and to have that privilege to be in front of a classroom and to have office hour meetings with them, and to try to guide them on any questions that they may have about psychology or about their lives, has been, nothing but a privilege. And I take it very seriously, and I do my best. And yeah, I guess I've been fortunate that that has led to major teaching awards here at Yale. And it also extends to graduate student mentoring and training PhD students. I take a lot of pride there, and I've just been super fortunate to have had some remarkably brilliant and hardworking students who have gone on to do well. In fact, I would say that probably the biggest reward in my career is not the awards. It's not the high teaching ratings. It's actually seeing my students do well. And my students are faculty all over the world, and seeing them doing well, seeing them produce their own students, is really the most gratifying feeling in my professional career.
Yeah, it's I hear that from you, and I know that of you from the time that I've been fortunate to spend with you, and it's interesting to me, Marvin. This seems to be very much who you are, a person who has gratitude in their life, a person who sees the positives, and I don't mean again in a Pollyanna-ish way. I mean, I think that you really see the positives, and for you in particular, there's two things I want to talk about with that, because it's you have such a remarkable career, and I want to talk about this in detail, because you're not just some person saying, "Oh yeah, teaching is a privilege." You've been so successful in your career that you could take these things for granted, and you don't. The other part is you study attention and context, which we're going to talk about shortly. And so I'm very curious as to how all of that wraps in together. But let's start this with talking about you finish your undergraduate degree and then take us all the way through your deanship and beyond at Yale.
Yeah, it's a long journey, but again, it was step by step. It was a simple formula for me. It was find a great mentor, and follow their guidance and example. So in graduate school at MIT, I've had remarkable colleagues, senior colleagues, and mentors. I started working with Jeremy Wolf, who's an attention expert. And then for my doctoral advisor, I worked with Molly Potter, who is a renowned cognitive psychologist, who also is just probably one of the best mentors in the field. If you look at some of her own students, much more successful than me, they include people like Nancy Canwisher, who's a very well-known cognitive neuroscientist, major award-winning scientist, Daphne Bavelier, who's like the video game expert in the world. These were all Molly Potter students. So I'm just fortunate to have been part of that family and to have learned from her intellect and mentoring style. And then I was fortunate as a postdoc to have worked with Ken Nakayama, Patrick Kavanaugh, who are both vision researchers and attention researchers, and also Nancy Canwisher, who I just mentioned, leading cognitive neuroscientist. And then after that, after my postdoc at Harvard, my first job was at Yale. But in between there, I have to mention my most important mentor in life, which is my wife. I met her as a postdoc at Harvard. She was at another institution, but we dated long distance. She's also a professor of psychology at Yale now. We've had faculty jobs together throughout our careers. But I mention her as my ultimate mentor because, and we all say this about our spouses, but she literally made me a better person. I was very poorly disciplined. Except for working hard on science, all other aspects of my life were a bit of a mess before meeting her, and she really grounded me. And I think I attribute most of my success, if not to her, because just trying to be a better person with her, I think has just ultimately led to a lot of good outcomes in my life.
Oh, that's beautiful. How long have you been married?
30 years. This is our
Wow.
30th anniversary this year.
Well, happy anniversary to
Thank
both
you.
of you.
Thank you.
What do you think are some of I mean, you said that she, helped you become more organized and decrease the mess in your life. What do you think were some of the key things that you learned and continue to learn over the 30 years from her?
Well, she's super well organized, and she's principled, um, and um, and she just doesn't behave badly. I behave badly before meeting her, and she just was like just like a prop. She was a like a like this model student type, and she was just very well organized, very disciplined, and I was not, and so just being with her just rubbed off on me.
Yeah, well, it's rubbed off well on you
Thank you.
because I see you as very well organized, very
Thank you.
ethical, very like just a good person. I mean, a truly good person.
Thank
So
you.
she's done a great job, Marvin.
Thank you. Thank you.
I don't know what kind of mess you were before, but she's done a
Yeah,
great
yeah.
job.
I can't go public about that.
Okay, so
I can say this though, like when I meet people for the first time, like after like 20, 30 years, people are like, Marvin's doing what? That's Marvin.
interestingly, I have a lot of the same questions about me, but yeah, but I think it's fantastic, and the mentors in your life. I mean, you've got not only do you have great mentors, but you also appreciate those mentors, which I think is the gift in return. And I don't think it's happened by accident. I mean, I think that there's something about you that people gravitate to and see the potential and want to help that, and maybe a little bit of luck and these kinds of things along the way as well. But yeah, I mean, I think it's well deserved. I know the awards aren't a big deal to you, but can you talk a little bit about the ones that are most meaningful to you, teaching and research as well?
Oh yeah, no, thank you. And I don't mean to say that they don't mean a lot to me. They do mean a lot to me. I love them. And whenever, especially when like everyone goes through ups and downs in one's in any career, but as academics, there are times when your papers get rejected, your grants get rejected, and there's a lot. You get a lot of negative feedback, even at every level in this field. And so like when I feel down, I always look back. I can look back at my awards as a source of strength and a reminder that I used to be good at one point. um, believe me, I'm super grateful for my awards, um, I'm grateful for both my teaching awards and my research awards. I think I am super grateful for like my APA Early Career Awards because just looking at the prior awardees who have it just makes me feel very honored and encouraged by it. I'm very grateful for my Troland Award from the National Academy of Sciences because prior awardees on that list include people like our mutual friend Dan Schachter, professor at Harvard, whom I understand was on this podcast before as
Hmm.
well. So he was a National Academy of Sciences Troland Award recipient a long time ago, and so when I received it, I'm like, wow, I'm in at least in the indirect company of my heroes. So that meant a lot to me. And then finally, the more recent prize is something called the Hoam Prize, the Samsung Hoam Prize, which is sponsored by Samsung, the large
Hmm. Hmm.
electronics company and chip manufacturer. They sponsor a special award across different areas of science and engineering and the arts. In South Korea, it's announced once a year, and I was a recipient of the prize in science. And that was just hugely meaningful to me because I got to bring my mom to the awards ceremony, and because it's advertised a lot in the Korean newspapers, I got a lot of congratulatory calls from my old friends who are saying, like, "That's Marvin? Is that the Marvin we went to high school and college with?" Like, no way.
That's fantastic. By the way, how is your Korean now?
Oh, my Korean's good. I understand fluently, and I can speak semi-fluently with a little practice. The day I touch down on a plane, I'm a little rusty, but within a few days, I become comfortable and I can get back to more fluency. So it's
Yeah.
pretty good now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're underselling the awards, but I understand. And as remarkable as you've been as a scientist, I think you're that plus some as a human being. But I do want to talk a little bit about the science. I mean, you've taken us through your training in Korea, MIT, Harvard. Then you took a professorship at Yale. And then take us through a little bit more.
Yeah, so my first job was as assistant professor at Yale, and we got that job together as a couple with my wife. But at the time, this was in the mid 1990s, the system here was different from what it is now. It was very difficult to get tenure, which is important for long-term stability to academics.
Mhm.
So we came to Yale knowing that and planning on not staying for long because tenure was so difficult. Um, and so we just decided we should still go to Yale because it's once in a lifetime opportunity. So we came to Yale, and then we were planning to be there for the full junior contract duration, which is 10 years, was 10 years at the time. But in our second year, we started getting in our third year, we started getting calls from other universities to defect and move, and then at that time, my wife became pregnant with our first child, and so we had multiple offers from other universities in our third year at Yale, and one of them was bold enough to um, uh, have those offers be tenured. So we moved to Vanderbilt after our third year at Yale because they were just recruiting us with an extraordinary offer, for which I'm also still super grateful. We had a real blast at Vanderbilt, and you know that it's a great place to study vision and performance and neuroscience. And so we just had a terrific time there.
Okay, so I knew that you had, you said Yale is a once in a lifetime opportunity. For you, it turns out to be a twice in a lifetime opportunity. But
Yeah.
but I didn't, it's interesting. I've never asked you this about why you moved. So that's really interesting. So the Vanderbilt job was you were in your third year at Yale, which is typically a sort of a mid-tenure kind in a lot of universities. And you moved to Vanderbilt and got tenure in the move. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. So as context, like tenure usually takes about 6 to 8 years for
Right.
most faculty. So, but I was fortunate, and this was part of their sweetening the pot for us, which was we got tenure in 3 years.
Yeah, that's remarkable, and it says a lot about both of you. That Vanderbilt's, as you said, a great university, great school, and so forth. So you were at Vanderbilt for how long before you went back to
Yeah.
Yale?
Yeah, we were there for 4 years, but I want to say it says more about Vanderbilt than it does about us, because I think and that actually was instructive for me as an administrator. It's like if you believe someone um, has potential and you really want to recruit them, then there's no reason to hold back.
Mhm.
If you think you're going to give them tenure anyway in 5 years, then give it to them in three so that they'll actually come. Is what happened to us at the time. Certainly we benefited from the fact that we had multiple offers from multiple places, including a retention offer from Yale, but without tenure. And so they just knew that, they were smart enough to know that the way to make the recruitment happen is to add that tenure on top of our offers. And so we were very happy there for 4 years. But then, my wife started to get restless. It was a great fit for me, but maybe a little bit of a less good fit for her academically. She didn't have colleagues in her area of study, which is high-level reasoning, and she has no interest in neuroscience, for an area for which Vanderbilt was very strong and appealing for me.
Mhm.
Just word got around that she was a little restless. We had offers from a prominent school that we turned down while we were at Vanderbilt. But then Yale had heard that we were on the market, and at that point, they had some vacancies open, and this is the biggest miracle in our life is that they had two openings, and they decided that they would offer those positions to us and bring us back.
Wow, that's fantastic. Well, again, well deserved. I mean, I don't think Yale does things by accident. So,
Thank you.
congratulations for that.
Yeah. I have one moral of this story, which just is another way to phrase the luck issue, which is I think if I had started at Vanderbilt, I would not have gotten tenure in 3 years. Oh, and I also think that if I had stayed at Yale, instead of moving to Vanderbilt, I don't think I would have gotten tenured, 4 years later, or what would have been the equivalent of 7 years from having started at Yale. Moving was a hassle, obviously, but I think the fact that I bounced around a little bit was, created a, added value to my case that may not otherwise intrinsically be there. So I am grateful for context and market forces in that regard.
Do you know the book, The Alchemist? Have you heard of this?
I've heard of it, but I haven't read it.
So, it's one of my favorite books, and one of the reasons is almost exactly what you just said. The central character in there, believes that he's on a particular path, what he calls his personal legend, but something shifts that path, and then he feels like he's on his path, and something shifts it, and so forth. And and this isn't from the book, but I heard this one time. When you look forward in life, it's a very windy road with lots of call outs one direction or the other. But when you look back, it's a straight path.
Hmm.
And it sounds, this is one of the like what you're describing, right? This isn't necessarily something that you would have designed, but it turns out to have worked out perfectly. And also something to be grateful for, how these things work out. So, you said, the biggest miracle. I think it's remarkable when these things happen, and it just brings me joy to hear this story from you about how these things have happened through your life, and I don't think by accident. I think that they have happened on purpose, so to speak. So,
Yeah, no, that's a very, very flattering thing to hear, and I see the connection, which is pretty neat. Um, I think my general algorithm, which may be useful for other people to hear, and something that you as a performance expert is quite familiar with. I'll go ahead and say it and apply it. Is just live in the present, and make your
mm,
decisions based on the present. I think when you try to optimize the present, and then I think then ultimately it leads to a good outcomes in the long run. Or maybe it could have been a string of lucky decisions, but so here's some examples. Like when we first started at Yale, we knew we wouldn't get tenure, and we had other school options that would have been long term, like more secure and less stressful, right? Because you wouldn't have to worry about your next job. But we just decided at the point that, like, in the present, going to the fanciest school we could would give us the most utility and satisfaction, right? And same thing when we moved to Vanderbilt. Like, we had options, multiple options from various schools, including the, the financially lucrative option of staying at Yale with their retention offer. But we just decided we got a kid coming along, and we don't want to have to stress out about tenure, while we raise our kid. And so we just made a decision in the moment to take tenure, and was very fortunate for it. And then at Vanderbilt, we like, okay, we're going to move it. We're going to Vanderbilt. We're not going to care about what's going to happen next because we're happy with this, with our colleagues and with this school. But then, because we were at such a great place and continued to do well, then other options kept coming up. So yeah, so I think we've been very lucky, but a lot of it's not with some grand scheme in mind. It's just like optimizing the present decision in front of us.
It's a really interesting topic. I've been thinking about this. I have thought about this a lot, that the not having, there's a balance of having plans and being in the moment at the same time. Interestingly, some of your research talks about this that we'll get to in a little bit, but this and the analogy to me, because you and I play golf together, the analogy comes up around golf as well, right? Having a plan of how you're going to play a hole, but being very much in the moment when you are hitting a shot. And which reminds me, by the way, our mutual friend, Dan Schachter at Harvard, I asked him if he had any questions to talk to you about, thinking that he would probably say something about your research. He did not. He wanted me to ask if you remembered his 76 on the golf course at Yale, this whole thing. He actually knew it, of course, hole by hole, shot by shot. So,
Yeah.
so I'm asking you the question, your experience with that.
Absolutely. And, I think it was one of my first rounds with Dan as a friend. And so in my mind, he's a scratch golfer. And because he played so well and just managed this completely novel course with such wisdom and expertise, that like that day, the way Dan played that day, that's how I see him forever. So even when he was like making bogeys and double bogeys with us, recently, it's like, oh, he's just having a bad moment, because in my mind, Dan Schachter is the guy who shot 76 at Yale.
I think we should just go with that. Dan
Yeah,
Schachter is a scratch golfer. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But I will say the interesting thing about it, going
And
back to
I'll add that I've always wanted to play like him. Like, I want to be as good as Dan.
we're gonna need to share this as
Yeah.
well.
But now I want to play as good as Mark. So that's my new goal.
I think you should have Dan as your role model instead. So, but thank you. This is one of the reasons why I love golf, is because of exactly what you were talking about, having a plan and staying in the moment, and being able to switch back and forth between those two things, which, that is one of the things that you've done from a research perspective. You talk about context, which, is essentially seeing your environment. And you also talk about attention, which is a momentary thing, right? So it's no surprise that you're so good at golf, because you've studied both of those at an extremely high level. So let's talk about both of these, right? So, because I think that they're both fascinating. Let's talk first about context, how your world affects you before you even know it affects you.
Yeah, thank you. And you mentioned that I have a lot of expertise in these topics. I just want to make clear for the listeners that I don't have expertise in golf. I'm a miserable golf player, but I do have expertise.
That is the first untrue statement you have said. I've played with you, so
yeah, no, it's a 10 is a 10. So like, the yeah. So I think I developed. my most important work on context and attention in the 1990s. It was one of the first things I worked on as an assistant professor at Yale. It was in collaboration with a remarkable first graduate student named Yuhong Zhang, who is now a professor at the University of Minnesota. But that work was developed for the following reason. In the mid 1990s, one of the biggest and most exciting topics that was of research in the entire field was this notion of inattentional blindness. This idea that what we can see and experience is very narrow and very limited. We have this illusion of seeing the whole world in its full richness. But when you test people, people are actually remarkably blind, stunningly blind to a lot of key information. Even in one's direct view, you might be looking at something and not noticing something changing or something unique about that item. And so there was this huge claim being made by several people that vision and attention has no memory. That we're kind of walking the world as if we're like completely amnesic, and with like blind to a lot of information, with very little memory for what's going on around us. That argument I felt was getting a little too extreme. Obviously I love the phenomenon of attentional blindness, and I studied it myself at the time. But this argument that memory doesn't play much of a role in vision just didn't sound right, given the fact that the world is very stable, it's structured, it's predictable. And so when I asked myself about what is predictable about the world and what is stable about the world, the answer to me was context. That context, the overall layout of items, the way cars move around, the way soccer players organize their attacks or defense, it's all organized and predictable and follows certain algorithms. And so my work called contextual cueing, probably some of the most important work I've done early in my career, was really to try to study that in the lab and reveal that in the lab, where we showed that people's sensitivity to context and their memory for context really guides how they interact with the world, even when people may not be able to report what they remember about the context. And so this idea that context influences us, whether we think about it or not, has been influential in that work, and I think has been influential in my thinking about everything.
So, there are two things that come to mind. One is the idea of context-dependent memory, which has been around for quite a while. So if you can talk about that. But the other one is intentional blindness and inattentional blindness, sorry. One of the things that you said that I think is such an interesting phrase is the relationship between memory and vision. And it's maybe a backwards relationship than the way people might think about it. Like they see something and then they remember it. You're talking about memory impacting what we see.
Correct.
Which is fascinating.
Yeah, that's correct. I think that point was fairly underappreciated by vision researchers and by attention researchers and by performance researchers. Memory researchers obviously know the importance of context, as you just mentioned, because memory itself, your ability to remember something, is so heavily dependent on and associated with its context, with its associations. And so there's this richness of memory that memory researchers appreciate, and that I just try to bring to vision research and visual attention research. And the form of that is what I described before as contextual cueing.
Yeah, it's this idea that the relationship between memory and context, the environment, is a really interesting idea. There's a phrase, I'm sure you've heard it 1,000 times, we see what we look for. And what you just said adds such a beautiful layer to that I hadn't thought about before. But the impact that memory has on what we see, we see what we look for, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And that has remarkable implications on our attitude about things. Our attitude has implications about what we see and remember, or hear and remember. Yeah, I mean, it spins up into this whole other genre about, we had talked about performance optimization, mindset. Depending on the mindset, it affects your physiology, and on and on. These are so intertwined. It's fascinating to me.
They're absolutely intertwined, and as one classic example is in the case of major depression. People with major depression, they see the same thing, but see it in very negative ways. They also have trouble disengaging from negative information or negative thoughts, called rumination. It's all exactly what you just said, with very profound consequences.
So, so the context is affecting us, what we see, what we experience in our environment. And so the other way to say this, which gets into another line of your research, is the context helps to sharpen our attention for something.
Yep, that's right.
So, yeah, please.
Yeah. So context, basically, there's no doubt there is too much information out in any given scene or moment, and so one's personal goals, their biases, their preferences will shape what you see and what you choose to look at. But a lot of that also just comes from how you've interacted with similar environments in the past, and that's where the context comes into play, because the context is what allows you to make a connection with your past experiences, and whatever. Let's say you got rewarded for looking in a certain place. Then and let's say that reward was unique to you. Then you will be your brain will shape how you look for things in that space based on that prior reward history. And importantly, that may differ for someone else who has a different reward history, and so on.
Yeah, I mean, this would make sense why two people can see the same thing and interpret it completely different, or hear the same thing, or however they're taking in information, and
That's right.
and it's completely different, and they both are right to some extent,
Yep,
or wrong to some extent, however you want to say it. Yeah,
that's right. They're both right or
yeah.
wrong to some extent, and a lot of that is not just dependent on what they're doing in the moment, but it's dependent on how what they've experienced in similar situations in the past. Um, let's say someone feels a lot of microaggressions, and feels offended by what otherwise might feel like neutral language to another person. It's probably because of the way that language was used in the past in a different context for that individual. And so this is something that psychologists are mindful of, which is that everyone brings their own personal histories into a situation, and that will shape how what they perceive from it.
Interesting. How do you, in your research, how do you either modulate or adjust for people's personal histories as they come in to do? Most of your research, at least these days, is with fMRI. So if
Right.
you can explain that a little bit, and then how you uh,
Yeah.
consider context and past experience.
Yeah, no, it's certainly complex to try to understand an individual's personal experiences, and so just for lab in the lab, just for experimental reasons, we try to control for that by just presenting people with very novel types of situations and very novel kinds of tasks for which they can't really, apply their past experiences. It's a little bit of a cop out for sure, but it's necessary for methodological purposes. So that's kind of our solution around that. And especially in the scanner, we use MRI scanners, the same kind of scanners that one would use to look for fractures or other abnormalities within the body. It's a technology that, as you know, allows you to take very exquisite pictures of your internal organs and bones and stuff, in a non-invasive, non-harmful way. Um, there's a variation of it that we use called functional MRI, which basically looks at it allows you to infer which brain regions are more active, and through that and through complex analyses of that data that we collect with MRI machines while people are doing tasks, we can infer and make educated guesses about how those brain areas allow you to form a memory, or what brain states caused you to forget something, or what made you blind something, or what make you see something better. These are all different um, types of cognitive performance that you can measure the brain activity associated with them.
Yeah, and so you, to some extent, decode perception based on brain activity. And when we were talking about this a month or so ago, you were talking about essentially putting together a kind of a report card, so to speak, for the brain, which is amazing to me. Can you talk about that a little bit?
It's been a lot of fun. I've been hugely privileged to be able to work with MRI technologies throughout most of my career. And in my own lab, some really fun findings they fall into two camps. One area of research focuses on decoding the brain activity, and our kind of classic finding that was led by an undergraduate student at the time. His name is Alan Cohen. He works in tech now. And the postdoc at the time is Bryce Kuhl, who's a professor at University of Oregon. Together, we developed algorithms for showing people faces in the scanner. So you're looking at pictures of faces in the scanner. And based on models we have of brain activity associated with different faces, we can guess from their MRI activity what faces people were looking at. We can draw based on the brain activity that we inferred from fMRI. We can draw the faces that people were looking at in the scanner. So that's a form of brain decoding that a lot of people work on in the field right now. We were decoding faces, but people are now decoding language, decoding stories that people are listening to. In our lab, we have an unpublished paper that's under review now that's decoding thought. So while people are just engaged in mind wandering, we can make guesses as to what topics they were thinking about. This is work led by my graduate student, Jin Ke, and the work was mainly led by and conducted at Monica Rosenberg's lab at the University of Chicago, which is where Jin Ke is from, before joining my lab. And I just had the fortune of being able to participate on that project a little later. And then with regards, that's one area of research. The other area of research is, okay, so it's fun to decode the mind, but like what would you use it for? And so we have this whole other branch of research that we call predictive modeling, which is basically a long word for developing what I like to call a brain panel or a brain report card. The brain panel being it's similar to your blood panel that you get when you get your annual blood draw, especially at an older age. You get an annual blood draw, and from that blood draw, doctors can make all kinds of different clinical assessments and diagnoses from your blood sample. And we're taking that as an example, and I'm calling it the brain panel because we're going to take, we're going to scan your brain and its functional activity and its unique patterns, and use that to make guesses about all your different cognitive functions, such as attention, memory, maybe clinical disorders, and so on and so forth. And so the idea is that from a brain scan, we can try to guess how people are performing or how they would perform along all these different cognitive measures. But that was a bit of a long explanation. But the simplest way to think about the brain panel is Harry Potter's sorting hat. So in Hogwarts, you put this sorting hat around the student, and that sorting hat not only it tells what house the student should be assigned to, but that's based on an overall profiling of that individual's characteristics, traits, and strengths and weaknesses. And that's kind of what I think a brain panel will be useful for, especially in clinical settings, especially to assess brain health, which we obviously will like to try to optimize and enhance.
So if you think about this 3 to 5 years down the road, the work that you're doing, the integration with AI, et cetera, where does this go? What's your prediction?
Yeah, so my hope, I don't think it'll happen in 3 to 5 years, but my long-term hope is that when that it would be part of your annual checkup, right? And from this brain scan, the physician would be able to determine if there are any abnormalities, such as maybe higher kind of risk for developing certain kinds of brain disorders, or just assessing overall cognitive health in a quantitative manner. I'm hoping it will also be useful for clinical assessment. Maybe as a first pass. Obviously, one should be seen by a professional, licensed, highly trained clinician, but to get a first pass at conditions like anxiety, depression, or other mental illnesses, it would be nice if we could use a machine to do a first pass assessment before referring them to the more time intensive and expensive and bandwidth limited clinical, formal diagnosis from a doctor.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating the work that you're doing, and one of the things that makes me even more interested in this is thinking across the work that you've done in your career, context, attention, et cetera. Can you draw a string through that as to what's common in that as far as you're concerned and your interests?
Yeah, I think what's common is my interest in performance. Like, I'm very interested in people reaching their full potential, and being able to do what they're capable of doing. Um, it's what fascinates me about golf so much. Obviously, I play golf not because I'm any good at it. In fact, I would argue that golf is the number one activity in my life that I don't like, but I find myself obsessed with. Right? Like, what other activity is there in life if you don't like doing something? Or sorry, let me rephrase this. I mean, I like golf, but it's the thing that I'm bad at. Like, when we're bad at something, we usually don't want to do it, right? If you eat something and it doesn't taste good, you usually don't want to do it. If you say something and it generates a negative reaction, or if it makes you look, uh, you know, um, if it makes you look less smart, you don't say it anymore, right? But golf is just that one of those domains where you just go through all this trouble to show that you're bad at something, and so I'm really interested in performance because, especially in golf, there's so much variability, and sometimes we play like pros, right? Like, every round, we usually will have a shot or two that's just like a pro shot, and so the question is, how can we have more pro shots? Why do the pros make amateur shots? And students taking exams, like, they know material. Why couldn't they show it on the exam? Just like someone giving a speech, like, they're clearly a good speaker who cares a lot about a topic, but why did they choke? Why did they fumble? These are all things I'm just so fascinated with, because it's not because we're not capable of doing something, but we're capable of doing it, and something has blocked us from realizing that potential. And that's the common theme in my life, is like, how do we understand this process? How do we diagnose it? And ultimately, how can we help people reach their full potential?
Yeah, I mean, I think so we share this, right? I agree with you. I think this is a fascinating topic, and to carry it even further, somebody who under practice conditions, whatever that happens to be that they're practicing, who's very successful, and then under the the game conditions, so to speak. And the game conditions could be, like you said, presenting, you're doing a presentation or speaking to an audience, or athletics, or whatever it happens to be, music. What's the gap between those two things? And from my perspective, I think about a lot of that in how we prepare. That if we prepare at our edge, at what we call the optimal challenge point, you're more likely to release this cascade of learning variables and biochemistry that holds up during competition when you're being tested. But one of the things that's really interesting about this, as I'm thinking about our work together, is some of that is about the context and the attention. Like if we're thinking about, for example, the crowd or the people around us or what other people are thinking, we are not paying attention to the things we should be paying attention to, which is the moment, which gets back to the point that you made a long time ago about how important it is to be in the moment. And I think there's a memory pathway, an attention and memory pathway that becomes important here. But you can train that. Like I think that the piece that I know you haven't missed, but could be missed, is that these things that you're talking about, how you pick up your environment, how you choose to attend to things, these types of things, we can train those. And they become important. And so your brain mapping that you're doing can give us a sense of when those things are not trained, at least not at the level that we want, and then we can train those, both for health and performance.
Yeah, and I think what you just mentioned about optimal challenge point and training is exactly what wraps this, puts the bow around everything we just talked about. Like, what is context and why is context important? Well, because it's what allows your present performance to benefit from your training. And what is training? Training is all about setting a context by which you can perform something optimally and automatically so that it becomes resistant to whatever distracting thoughts or whatever differences there may be in a unique situation, especially like in competition. And so, really, again, it just puts a bow around everything. It wraps it up nicely because ultimately why is context important is because it's what allows, again, training, what allows one to benefit from all that training and allows one to be in the present.
Yeah, I just heard what you said, and I think, okay, contextual cueing, an area where, you have expertise. The phrase that comes to mind is that the world leaves maps inside of us, right? Our experience leaves maps, and those maps sometimes lead to treasure, and sometimes they lead in a completely different direction. And part of that map is the training piece, right? So during training, if we're looking for the right things, we tend to see the right things. And one of the things, that I've seen in training is that people tend to look at the gap between where they are and where they want to be. They look at the problem, and so they see the problem. One of the things that I do working with both athletes and high performers in other areas is have them say something good after each shot, for example, in golf. So they're looking for the solution piece of this. And I had this conversation, Marvin, with a 10-year-old one time. His dad came up to me and at a driving range, and we started talking. And the 10-year-old said, "Can you give me some advice?" And I was thinking, well, I don't know that I can. Partly because you're 10, and partly I don't know that I have any great advice. But I instead told him a story, and you just reminded me of this story. And I said, you could be one of two golfers. You could hit a shot and think about what was wrong with that shot. Or you could hit a shot and think about what was right with that shot. And one of those golfers is training themselves to be afraid of every shot that they hit because they know you're going to look for something negative. The other golfer is training themselves to be excited about each shot because there's going to be something positive after the shot. And so then I asked him, which golfer do you want to be? And he said, I want to be the happy golfer, which I love the fact that he said that all the way through. Yeah. We have that choice, right? I love the fact that you're looking between context and attention, because we have the choice to choose to see what we want to see to a large extent. I mean, it's not an infinite choice, but certainly most of the things in our life, we can do that. This is one of the reasons why I know we were talking about golf a lot, but it's not really golf. It's an analogy for life. This is one of the reasons why I love playing golf with you, because you see so many positive things and perspective and context when you're playing. You've said that you're not a particularly good golf. I don't see that at all. And partly it's because of how you carry yourself, not just in golf, but in life. And I think that's a choice that you've made over and over again, a choice that all of us can make. I mean, what are your thoughts about this?
Well, number one, thank you, and you're very kind to say all those things. I'm still puzzled at what you see as being happy about my game, or my being happy about my game, because and so I'm just thinking to myself, like, what kind of show am I putting on? What kind of facade am I putting on? Of course, but I think with the difference is that, like, when I'm playing with you, I'm just so much enjoying the company with you that that's probably what. Why you're seeing me smile all the time. It's certainly not my game. Although I do, people find me odd, but when I hit a nice shot, I do tell myself I hit a nice shot. Like, I say out loud, "Great shot, Marvin," and people think it's the weirdest thing. Yeah. So. But in general, I am a positive person because I know all the theory, and it's just there's just so many advantages to focusing on the positive, um, and I think you mentioned, like, the other thing, maybe theme that runs across all my memory, attention, performance research, all that, is that I really care a lot about prediction. I just, like, I'm just a chronic planner. Like, I spend more time planning than actually doing stuff. I could probably, like, finish a task in the time it took me to plan for it, or plan the time to set aside for it. But I just really love prediction. And I think if I have one little gift in terms of interpersonal relationships in life, I do think I have a little bit of a gift in seeing the positive in people, and seeing their potential. I just, I just have this I just get this gut feeling when I get to know someone, about what their potential is like, in any given domain, not in life in general. Like, for example, the most classic example is, like, when I choose grad students, I can tell from a conversation if they have the drive and the motivation it takes to become a professor in this field, because, as you know, it's very hard to achieve professorships in our field. It takes a lot of tenacity, and it takes a lot of love for what we do, and that tends to be visible for me in a few minutes, just after talking with some student. And certainly after working with a student for a few months and such. Like, I mentioned my wife, but, like, when I first met her, and I'm sure we say this all about our spouses, but, like, I was just enamored by her potential. Like, I was just like, wow, this person is really special, right? Not just who they are now, but you can just tell that they're on a trajectory and you just want to, can I be part of that trajectory? Right. And same thing for coaching, right? Like, we all, um, when we see something positive or potential in someone, then we just want to ride that, right? We want to be a part of that, and that's part of the prediction. It's part of the context. It's, the word I just mentioned, like, trajectory. That's something that I care a lot about, and even my brain panel stuff. It's all about, like, like, what is this person's trajectory, and it's not a narrow path, but like, what is this person's potential? What is it? What is this cone trajectory cone? Like, what are all the possible paths that this person can follow? I think it's just just a very exciting part of teaching and coaching.
It's the idea that memory is a lot of people think about memory as a storage house for information, but it's a prediction machine as well.
Yeah,
And in fact,
that's right.
in a lot of ways, I hadn't thought about it from the perspective that you just said. I mean, that we are able to make predictions based on our memory, um, like driving in traffic, right? If we are driving to work, for example, something we've done many times, we're constantly predicting what's going to happen with the flow of traffic. And if there is no violation to that prediction, we basically don't remember anything about that ride. But if there's a
Hmm.
violation to prediction, now all of a sudden we pay attention, which
Hmm.
gets us back to context and attention,
Hmm.
which, in a way sounds like two different topics, but they're so intertwined. And then memory is part of obviously part of this as well. I'm really curious, what do you see or feel? And the feel part is particularly interesting to me. What do you see or feel in these graduate students that you have a sense about that person's going to go someplace?
Yeah, no, it's really hard to articulate, except that I need to make a decision on whom to choose to join my lab or join our program. So it does boil down to a concrete decision, but like I don't know how to articulate it. But the way I do articulate it is that like this person is like so and so student I've had in the past. Obviously all my students are super different from each other, but there's just this sense of forward trajectory that I just sense in some students and I don't sense it in others.
Marvin, I think that that's part of the magic, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
hard to articulate, but I know when I see it.
yeah, yeah.
And
Exactly. That's it. You know it when you see it.
yeah. And
Yeah,
I think that is part of the magic, which I think, a lot of times we think about science as being the sort of the antithesis of magic in some way. I think science is magic,
yeah.
and I think places like what you talked about where you don't know the answer, that's
Hmm.
so cool, right? What
Hmm.
an opportunity that gives us
Yeah,
as we go.
yeah.
We're talking about graduate students, but you teach as well. And I want to talk a little bit about your experience in and out of the classroom because at Yale, you were convinced to be a dean at a couple points, and you told this hilarious story, I thought, about why you stepped down from the deanship most recently. But if you can talk a little bit about your dean roles, and in particular how your research has impacted that.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. But just one, if I may, just one quick thing about prediction that I think may
Hmm.
resonate with most people who like to watch sport, football, or especially like soccer, where play or basketball, like sports where plays unfold. Like there's a moment. I still remember this vividly from watching World Cup games. This is a World Cup year, as you know. Like you just know, like starting from midfield, like the way people are moving, the way the attack is unfolding, it's like a goal is going to be scored, right? You know that feeling, right? Or like,
Hmm.
or the quarterback's going to connect with a receiver, or the running back is going to, break through the line. You see it, you know it before it happened, right before it happens, right? I just love that about sport, and I just wanted to share that with. I think that type of prediction is something that we can all appreciate. But going back to my dean role, like I've always loved teaching. I love mentoring. And based on that, my first major administrative role was as a head of a residential college at Yale. Yale, the college is divided up into now 14 residential colleges, and each has a faculty head. And that's just a huge position of privilege because you live with the students and you meet with them all the time. You know their names. You follow their 4-year trajectory through college. In many cases, you get to know their parents and their families and friends. And it's just a really rewarding position where you get to see a student's growth through college, and also get to help them out where needed. So that is like a type of mentoring, coaching position, this head of college position that I did for 9 years. And then I stepped down from that because it's a 10-year term. And because my daughter was a senior in high school and I wanted to be at home for her senior year. So I stepped down from that. But while I was on sabbatical, 1 year away from the head of college position, the another position at Yale called the dean of Yale College that opened up, and I was honored to have been invited to serve in that role for 5 years. This is 2017, and that job. Basically, you're in charge of almost everything related to undergraduate education at Yale. Starting from admissions, overseeing commencement and everything in between, curriculum development, majors, certificates, study abroad, financial aid, just student life, pretty much everything involved with student success and well-being at Yale was part of that office's charge, and I had the great privilege of a staff of over 200 people to help oversee this for Yale College. And it was, again, the biggest honor of my life is how I describe it. And the hugest privilege of my life. It's like, I just said how much I value mentoring. Well, this is like the Uber mentor position. And you get to work with such a great, and it's certainly not a single position. You work with a remarkable team of dedicated professionals who just really care a lot about student success and well-being. And so I did that for 5 years and loved it so much. Um, uh, in my final year, though, or actually in the final 2.5 years, it overlapped with COVID, the COVID pandemic, and so that definitely was not fun. That was probably but I try not to complain about it because as much as I disliked it, I know that students disliked it even more. Imagine like you have 4 years in college in your entire life, and imagine having to go through the disruptions and constraints that COVID imposed on our students on all around the world. Like you just feel so bad for them that I can't complain about how bad it was for me and my family because the students had it worse. And but that definitely took a toll on my labs research, which I was able to maintain in parallel while I was dean of the college. And I was able to maintain my lab pretty productively up until COVID. But as soon as COVID hit, like I couldn't spend a minute. I could barely spare a minute for my lab's work because I had to do so much to, bring some sense of normalcy and safety to the college. Like we were like, especially in those first few months, I was in Zoom meetings from like 8:30 to 8:30, 12 hours a day. There was so much going on. And so my lab took a big hit. By the time I was in my final year as dean, I had to make a decision whether to continue or return to the lab. My lab at that point had dwindled down to 2 people because people were graduating and new people weren't joining on. Understandably, because it's like that guy's distracted as a dean, he's not going to be a good mentor. Yeah, and so I just had to make a decision, like either stay in administration for the rest of my life, or go back to my lab while I still had it, because I was pretty sure if I stayed on as dean, I wouldn't have a lab to go back to, and it would have been too late to rebuild it. And so fortunately, I was able to return to the lab and be able to build it back up, and now we're doing fairly well. And so I think it was yeah. So that's how things are now.
Yeah, so what I remember is that you had a paper that had, but so part of this story is that you had a paper that you had submitted to a very prestigious journal, and it got reviewed, which helped you with the decision of moving back into the lab.
Yeah, no. So, no, definitely, I was getting a grant. I was concerned about the dwindling size of my lab, but also all the grants I've been submitting around that time were being rejected, which made me think I needed to get back into the lab. But I think the story about the prestigious journal is a more recent one. So now I'm back in the lab. I built it back up, and we submitted a paper to a prestigious journal. It got reviewed. They usually don't review papers. They usually reject the papers a lot, even without reviewing them. But this one got reviewed. And so while it was being reviewed, I was thinking like, oh yeah, this is exactly why I stepped down, because like I'm back in the game. I'm back, in the hunt. So it's like going to the dance if you're a college basketball player, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
back in the game. I'm in the finals and all that. Um, and so I was feeling very good about my decision, but the paper got rejected. And right, I think that's the part I think I joked about it when we last saw each other. The paper got rejected, and it made me think, oh man, I want to go back into administration. Like I don't like this research stuff anymore. And so I think I found a good balance. I'm going to be department chair, which is a much less demanding role than being a dean. So I think it might be the right balance of administration and research. It's especially meaningful for me to be a department chair, because all this time I've been serving other parts of the university, students or college, or the whole thing, but never really having direct work for my department. But this time I'm really just taking care of my colleagues and our students and our majors and our grad students. So I think it's going to be the right amount of administrative work, and will be certainly a deep amount of satisfaction and reward, because I feel like someone is coming back to their family and trying to do their household chores now. Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. I'll tell you what, you had spoken about COVID, and I think everyone has their COVID stories, but being a dean, during that time, and the unknowing, um, I mean, that must have been amazing in so many different ways, test you in so many different ways. Did any of the things that you do from a research perspective, either directly or conceptually, impact your life, your decision making back then?
That's a good question. In general, I like to think that not just my own research, but just being a psychologist, has been very helpful for me in all my roles in life. I do think psychology teaches you to be humble, but it also teaches you to be positive, and I think it teaches you to be resilient. And that's certainly the latter, and latter two that were most important during the pandemic, is that, like it was really awful. It was really grim. I still remember the early on meetings where public health experts were saying like there has been no vaccine developed in less than 2 years that would be that would be able to combat this. But of course, with the mRNA vaccines and such, like they did it in record time, right? So that's something that shows the power of science and human ingenuity, right, and resolve. That's something we could never have expected. But like, yeah, so I think it was hard times for everybody, but we also have a lot to be grateful for, that that it wasn't worse. I guess it's odd to be, because again, so many people have died and suffered. So I guess it's hard to say. It's hard to say. Use the word gratitude, but in any event, it's fortunate that that the vaccine came out as quickly as it did, and it is fortunate that pretty much the world came together to do what it needed to do to minimize the costs of the pandemic.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's one of those memories where everybody remembers, right? We'll all have. So, Marvin, we've got just a little bit left. I appreciate your time all the way through. I've got some quick hit questions
Quick hit
for
here.
you. So, some are going to be just statements that I make and your reaction to that, and some will actually be questions. Okay. The myth of multitasking. You address this in your research.
Yes. So the myth of multitasking is the sense that people think they can multitask without any cost or consequences, and so what people should know is that yes, you can multitask, but it comes at costs and with consequences. You are about 30% less accurate and about 30% slower if you multitask compared to when you don't multitask. So sometimes it's inevitable. Sometimes it's fine to listen to the radio, obviously, while you're driving, right? But some tasks are better off being done alone with focus. And that's just a personal decision as to what that would be.
It's an interesting topic, in particular, having just talked about COVID and the fact that education was online, and that was a multitasking on steroids, so to speak. I mean, people had conversations going on the side. I mean, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, it's
Well,
interesting.
we do know that Zoom learning is less effective, right? We should
Yeah.
make that clear. Yep.
I just, one of the things I think is interesting, by the way, to extend this point, is we also know that there is a very strong correlation between the introduction of technology like computers and screens and so forth in a classroom to learning. So I'm sure you know these statistics, but when you look at around 2010 when the computers were ubiquitous in a classroom, you started to see a drop off in education scores, standardized scores and those types of things around the world. So it wasn't unique to the U.S. And so I think adding, the technology of Zoom or, some kind of a virtual setting and so forth, it really, I think one of the things that's happened is we assumed that teaching would be the same, even though the mechanism is different. And that's probably a faulty assumption.
Yep. And it'll be interesting to see what impact AI has now on learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. Do you have a prediction?
Um, well, the my prediction is that if it's left unchecked, it will not be good. But the optimist in me always feels that we need to find ways to make it useful rather than harmful.
Yeah, I agree as always with you, Marvin. Okay, next statement. Attention is expensive.
Oh, that's a good one. Attention is, I think it's not expensive um, because if you train properly and if you're in the moment and if you don't try to multitask, then I think the goal is to make attention as it relates to performance automatic, habitual, and not expensive. It should be the path of least resistance. With proper training, with focus, it should be the path of least resistance. And so it should come naturally without effort. I think where it becomes effortful, where it becomes expensive, is if you're trying to multitask, if you're trying to switch between multiple things too frequently. We call that task switching. That's also expensive and costly for attention. And I think if you always try to wing it in the moment as opposed to train for something, like don't fix your swing on the golf course, right? We know that's bad, right? The same idea, like, make it automatic on the range and then just bring your game onto the course. Same thing on the field, in the gym. It's all about bringing your game to the competition, but do all the hard work, the expensive stuff during training.
It's that one statement that you just made is something we could have an entire discussion about, because how you do that becomes very important. It's one of the things that I notice with the more elite level athletes who've done the hard training, the ability to let go, to surrender, so that the system automatically attends to what it needs to and doesn't attend to other things. Okay, so attention is how the brain decides what gets a future.
I think I'm okay with that. Yeah. I think it makes sense because attention decides mostly what gets remembered. It's what guides its decisions. It guides its actions. So I like that. Yep.
Can we wrap it one more level, that attention decides what gets a future because, like you said, of memory, and memory then shapes attention, right? And context, right? So obviously they're all intertwined. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Moments of joy, Marvin. What are a few moments of joy that you've had in your life?
Moments or periods? Moments?
It's your question. Do whatever you want with it.
Moments of joy. I mean, like I every day, meeting friends, being with family. Being with family is probably number one. A good meal, birdies, um, or just a walk down the course. I prefer walking over riding. Sorry to use the golf theme so much, but it is a microcosm of life. Yeah, seeing students do well. Yeah,
Okay.
and you know what? Data for me, like just to bring out the nerdy, just to have a nerdy answer. It's like I love data. Like I just love seeing data. Any data, like experimental data coming out, or just any data. I even track my resting heart rate every morning. Like I don't know why I look at that like 5 times a day, but I just like watching my resting heart rate. Yeah, I just love data.
Yeah, I'm kind of an HRV fanatic as far as that goes.
HRV, yeah, sure,
Yeah.
mine's is not good, so I don't watch that number.
Okay, so but this may be the toughest of all questions: pizza or steak?
Steak,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Is pizza a close second or?
I love pizza, but a good steak is hard to beat. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, if you
This,
ask me steak versus sushi.
okay. Steak versus sushi.
Sushi.
Okay. So now I know the hierarchy. Yeah. This is great. Marvin, thank you so much. This was so much fun. And I've said this to you before, but I'm going to keep saying it. You're a remarkable human being. I mean, who you are as a person, who you are as a scientist. The one thing that I don't think comes across when we talk, when people hear you, is how really, truly remarkable the contribution you have made to Yale, to science, and to other people around. You talked about the mentors that you've had in life. You have been that mentor to so many other people. And I'm just so grateful to be your friend. So thank you for being with me for this time.
Well, thank you for having me on this wonderful show. I love the conversation we had, and I know everything you said about me. I triple that and heap back on you. Yeah, and truly grateful for this hour and also for you as a friend. So thank you again.